This is the final Addams Family October here on Bentley House Minis. I'm going to be using this month to wrap up my entire Addams Family project that's been going on for more than 10 years. I think I've really only done Addams Family October for 3 years maybe on this channel, and each time I've done it I've focused on big projects that needed to be finished. But all of those big projects are now complete, and all I have left are the little bitty details that need to be done in order to call this the end. Now, as many of you have already stated, you know it won't be officially the end because there are so many things I can continue to add and collect and put into the house. But what I want to accomplish here is finishing up this project so I could put it on display and people won't be wondering, why are there windows missing? Why don't any of the doors have knobs? Why isn't there anything hanging on the wall? Why don't any of the dolls stand up? And other things like that. So this month, even though I don't have huge one single projects to focus on each week, all of these tiny little details are going to take time, which is why they've kind of gone by the wayside in the past because they were going to take a lot of time to finish up. One of the big projects I'm going to be focusing on in today's video is gluing things down, actually committing and making things permanent. It's hard to say. Before I begin officially gluing everything in, I have been putting off making Addams Family framed portraits for a very long time. I have some of them completed, but I really want a lot of them. If you look at any of the Addams Family TV shows or movies, they have things on the walls. They have portraits on the walls, and I want to make sure that I fill my walls with these items. Currently, nothing is permanently attached to the walls. I've been putting it off forever, so I guess it's time to make some things that will be permanently attached to the Addams Family walls. These are the framed portraits that I already have to go into the house. This was one of the first ones I framed. This was a pre-made frame, but this is Charles Addams sitting in his armchair in one of his studies. He is the original creator of the Addams Family. He drew the Addams Family cartoons in the New Yorker, and so definitely had to include Charles Addams. I also have these four, which I hand painted in a previous video, and then this one, which is a print off of the famous giraffe portrait that hangs in the original 1960s Addams Family house. What I want to add now are some of the actual pictures of the actors that played the characters, some really interesting artwork, like the skeleton art there. I don't even know, I just thought it would be cool, something you'd find in the Addams Family house. I did notice I already have this one of Wednesday framed, and I also wanted to add a Charles Addams cartoon, which you will see at the top of this page. I just really wanted to pay homage to the history of the Addams Family. I also want to create some posters that will go up on the wall, so this is a page of different types of posters, and yeah, so let's get started on this. I'm going to be using some glossy Mod Podge to go over the pieces that I want to be framed, and you may have noticed that the pages are printed a little bit differently. Anything I want to have a frame, I made sure to space out because I like to use the page around the picture to glue my frame to. But these that I'm using for a poster, I'm not having to leave as much space around them because they're not going to get frames, they're just going to get cut out. I'm using matte Mod Podge on the posters. I don't know why I'm doing that. I thought the glossy would look better in the frames, but honestly, a lot of those I end up just putting resin over in the end because you can really see the brush strokes really well in the glossy Mod Podge. I just happened to find these chipboard frames that were in some of my scrapbooking supplies. I went through some supplies recently and I thought, hey, these might make some interesting Addams Family frames, but they're a little bit too flat for my taste. I wanted something a little bit more artsy and bumpy, and you know, antique frames just kind of have that bumpy appearance. When I did an Arteza video where I made those first 4 Addams Family portraits, I realized that the Arteza outdoor paint makes this kind of puffy paint type texture. It's actually a little bit like icing. So as you can see, I'm putting the paint into a plastic bag that I poked a hole into the corner, and I'm really just going to use it like an icing bag and put the paint on top of the frame, making all sorts of different designs. I'm not really looking at any examples that probably would have been helpful. Some of them I'm just kind of following the pattern that's already on the cardboard piece. And then other ones I'm just kind of making up as I go. And it really does end up looking like cake frosting, and so I do need to let this dry. It actually doesn't take that long, maybe 2 or 3 hours for it to dry completely, and then it is ready to be painted over. I did use hot pink, in case you're wondering, because I don't use hot pink that often in my artwork, and so I felt like that's the paint I would probably miss the least. While those are drying, I figured I could go ahead and start cutting out the posters. I really do like the matte Mod Podge on top of the cardstock this was printed on. I think it gives it a really nice feel to it, and I do know that my prints are going to be protected once they're put up in the dollhouse. Here you can see a little bit more how visible the lines are on the glassy Mod Podge, and I don't really show this, but I do, after everything is framed, I do take some resin, UV resin, put it over the top and then cure it, and that takes care of the lines. It's nice and glossy. It looks like it's a framed piece of art with glass over it. So that's kind of how I fixed that. I left some of them with the lines, but several of them got the resin treatment. I'm taking the really long Charles Addams cartoon and I'm putting it down onto some chipboard. The reason for this is after I put the Mod Podge on them, they got a little bit wavy, and so before I frame it, I wanted to make sure that it was good and flat. I'm going to be making my frames using a technique that I showed during the Cardboard House series, and all I'm doing is making long strips in different sizes, and then I'm going to be gluing them on top of each other to make a little bit more of a detailed trim. I'm going to make long strips of these, and then they can be cut just like wood trim can be cut with my Easy Cutter. This one has 3 pieces, kind of a stair-step effect. The nice thing about making out of chipboard is you really kind of do whatever you want, and there's so many different ways to do a frame, so it makes it a fun process to try and come up with some different designs. All I'm going to do for this, like I've done in all my other framing videos, is just match it up, going around. This one was a little bit more difficult because there's no like edges on this, so I was just kind of guessing what was going to be a 90-degree angle to get a decent frame for this piece. I had been envisioning this Charles Addams cartoon hanging in the dining room of my Addams Family Dollhouse since the very first time I saw it, and so this is the only cartoon that's hanging up in there, but I knew I had to have it in there. There may be a few of you who think it doesn't fit, and that's totally fine. I do think it kind of sticks out just a little bit, but it's one of those things that I've wanted for a while, and it has to be in there. I'll probably age it a little bit because it's very, very stark white, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. Once the hot pink Arteza paint is dry, I go over it with black to create a base coat. And I do end up having to do 2 coats of black because that hot pink just keeps wanting to shine through. I ended up being pretty happy with the designs. They're not 100% perfect, but that's kind of the theme of the Addams Family house, and so it works for me. And they do look kind of like iced frames, like frosting on frames, which is kind of how old antique frames look, I think. Previous to painting the frames, I had kind of figured out which ones would work for which pictures, and that's why they have a check mark next to them. Those meant that they were getting a chipboard frame once they had dried, and so I'm putting them back on there to make sure I have the correct frames matched up with the correct pictures. And once I have them lined up, I can just glue them down, and then I use an X-Acto blade to go around the outside and cut them out. I think they all end up looking okay with just the basic black frame, but I do end up going back later and adding a color on a few of them. I just kind of played around with it and did what I liked. I also added some more chipboard frames to a few of these, And then I added some popsicle stick frames. These were the most simplest form of making a frame. It's just popsicle stick, and I used my easy cutter to cut 45-degree angles. And I've had several people ask about putting Debbie in the project, so I put her in with this little, I tried to make it look like a handmade frame, kind of like Fester had made it himself for his room after she was gone. Anyway, I did want to show you this little trick with the small Post-its. I like the really tiny ones because they're great for getting in the corners of small miniatures. And then I can just paint to my heart's desire on the frame, and once I'm done I can pull the Post-its off and there is no paint on my picture. Here's my tray of completed portraits and frames, and I have some posters here that are going to go in Grandmama's kitchen and in Fester's room and maybe a few other places. I also have some items sitting around the house that I know need to be put on the wall. So as I go through gluing things in, I will try to give you the best view possible. I am a full-size person working in a 12 scale house, so that's always complicated to try and get the best shot. I will try my best. Also, to do this, I have decided to use hot glue because I do want things to be permanent, but on the very off chance that someday I do want to take something out, I think hot glue is a good choice because it can be affected by temperature. So I could, if I wanted to, take a hairdryer and just focus it on that piece and start to loosen the glue, as opposed to tacky glue or Fabri-Tac, which isn't really affected by temperature. That gives me a better chance of getting the piece removed. It may still leave an ugly mark on the wall, but at least I have a chance to put something else there if I decide I want to switch it out. So let's get into the house. First to go in, of course, is going to be Charles, and this is where I get nervous with the hot glue. I'm going to be testing everything, trying to make sure that it goes in straight. And my first challenge I came upon was putting in this giraffe portrait, because the way I built this wall, it will not sit flat against the wall. So I actually had to put hot glue on just a few pieces of the wall and then put the picture on top of it. If I had put glue onto the picture, I wasn't sure it was going to hit the wall in the correct places. So I kept trying to make sure that it was straight, and also that I wasn't dripping hot glue onto the floor. So sorry, I am going to have to edit out quite a few headshots in this video. Now, I will say I did measure this wall before I created this picture frame, but they always say measure twice, cut once. I only measured once and it does not fit. So I'm having to rearrange the dining room so that I can put this portrait on this wall, which thankfully does fit. I really did not want to have to remake that. And what I'm learning here is that it is going to be much easier for me to do anything in any room by removing the miniatures that are inside of it. Now, I will warn you, this is about to be extremely painful because this is my first mess up. There is hot glue on that painting, and right now I think it is straight, and it is very not straight. So I do panic and try to pull it off of the wall while the glue is still hot, although it's not hot at this point, and it makes quite a mess. So from this learning point at this moment, I remembered, hey, your plan was to heat things up if you needed to remove something, and I also decided that trying to have the camera film everything I do was not going to work, and it was going to end up with several crooked paintings. So the next few shots you're going to see already have things hung up, and I will tell you about them as I show you. You can see that I have the cartoon hung up in the dining room, I have the family portrait in the hallway, and that is Pugsley at the end. It's kind of hard to see him. Now we are suddenly up in Gomez and Morticia's room. This was another hard one to show you, but you can see the portrait of Morticia on the left, and on the right is a mirror that was made by June Gallagher. I will link her video in the description box below. She showed how she made it before she sent it to me. Now I'm going to add another family portrait right above the steps. This one is the round frame, and you might be able to tell I added a little bit of gold metallic paint on top of the black, and it gave it this really nice gilded look. There's a couple more photos in the corner of the living room, and while I was in the living room, I realized I needed to hang up my moose horns permanently. These are kind of a throwback to the moose in the original TV show where the horns were going different directions, but I just have moose horns going the same direction. It was a little bit too late, but I realized that my phone was great for lighting up portraits and making sure I can see while I'm putting things up. I had a few more in that upper hallway, including one of Fester that you see in the original Addams Family movie. Now I'm working in Lurch's room. This is way down in the basement, and because Lurch is an avid artist and a portrait painter, I thought these two portraits would look good in his room, and then this fun one of Blossom Rock as Grandmama is going to be on the other side of the wall, kind of hidden and tucked away in the Addams Family vault. It's a little dark here, but we'll go back to the vault later in the month, and so you'll see her again. And then, of course, Debbie is getting hung up in Fester's room where she belongs. I've gotten all of the framed art put into the house now. It was very nerve-wracking. I did not have a ton of working time when it came to using the hot glue, so that's something to keep in mind. I did decide I'm not going to do hot glue for these. I want a little bit more working time because they're like little posters, and I want to be able to turn them back and forth and decide how I like them, because typically when they're hung up on a wall, like in Grandmama's kitchen, they're there for reference and may not have always been hung up perfectly like a painting would have been. What do you think?
Good job.
Talking to Stormy. Her opinion's very important. So, let's hang up some posters. Again, I found it much easier to remove existing minis from the scene, so I wasn't just constantly knocking things over. This is up in Fester's bedroom. This is at his workbench, and in the original, the very first Addams Family movie, you can tell that he's hung several things up in his room. So I put some anatomy type posters, I put some old medicine type posters up, and yeah, so I think it added a lot of character to this space. I went back and bent some of the edges of the posters. I probably should have done that before I hung it up, but I think it gave it a nice antique look. Next, we're moving over to Pugsley and Wednesday's room. Pugsley's room has long needed these signs that were sent to me by my friend Kim. She sent all these different signs and they're really cool looking, and it's time to hang them up, along with this dartboard, because there's a dartboard like in the opening credits of the Addams Family TV show, so we've got to have a dartboard. I think these are adding so much detail to Pugsley's room, and now it's time to go to Grandmama's basement. For Grandmama, I have several posters that are about different types of plants and herbs, and also some anatomy posters for different animals, and just a few things that might make you uncomfortable to see on the wall of the kitchen of someone who's making you dinner. And of course, I gotta put her table back. I had taken that out to put the posters in, and I really think that's what this kitchen needed. It needed a few more things on the wall. I also decided at this point it would be a good idea to glue some books permanently into the bookshelf. I had all these books sent to me by Lindsay B, and she sent me like a whole package full of things, so we'll probably see some other things from her later down the road, but I thought this would be a great time to just work on the bookshelf. So I've got my little keyboard vacuum, and things have gotten a little dusty, which I'm okay with dust in the Addams Family house. But if I'm going to be gluing things down, I don't want to glue them onto a dusty surface. I'll just let the dust come back again naturally. I'm going to be spacing them out so that I like how they look. And this was so easy and fun to do because she just did the perfect mix of different sizes of books. And anywhere there are leftover gaps, I'll just be putting some Addams souvenirs.
To glue or not to glue? That is the question.
It's at this point that I realized I know I have some other books somewhere. I used to have other books before Lindsay sent me these beautiful books, and then I found them, and they are quite a collection, and some of these are from Kim as well. So I'm going to disperse them amongst Lindsay's books, and this is what I ended up with. I'm pretty happy with it. I think I'm going to end up gluing just the books and leaving the spaces because I'm still not sure if those are the miniatures I want on the shelves forever. Now that I have all of the posters in on the wall permanently, I've made the difficult for me decision to glue some things down to furniture. I'm only going to be gluing down the things that I'm absolutely 100% sure I want to stay there forever. Because I've been working on this project for so long, I'm 95% sure about every single piece that's in this project, but if for any reason I have any doubts whatsoever, there's really not a ton of pressure on me right now to glue absolutely everything down, but anything that's going to help it a little bit easier to set up and take down is going to be a move towards wrapping up this project. So let's glue some more stuff down. This is the little table that sits back in the smoking nook that's on the same level as Gomez's office. Now, while I am aware of the dangers of smoking and I'm trying not to promote it in any way here, it was something that was pretty prevalent in the 60s, which is when the Addams Family TV show was airing. And so it was in the show. They do show them smoking a hookah, and Gomez is pretty well known for having cigars. So that's what this table is all about. Now this hookah was sent to me, it's actually one of the first miniatures that was ever given to me by another miniaturist. It was from my friend Sans back in my blogging days, and I've always loved it, but it's a little bit delicate, so I'm kind of excited to glue it down to this table so that I know it's more secure. The other thing I didn't realize that would come with gluing things down is being able to style things a little bit better. So for example, the cords on this hookah need to be curled really delicately, and I've always been worried that they were going to fall off, but now that I can use glue, I can curl them up so they look a little bit more realistic, and I don't have to worry about them being pulled off down the road or the whole thing falling off the table. So this is the little table that goes back in Gomez's smoking nook, and I think it looks really good in place, and it was a good start for gluing things down. The next thing I'm going to work on is the bedroom suit for Gomez and Morticia. I think I made this before I started my YouTube channel, so I don't have a video of when I made these, but it is a 3-piece matching bedroom suit with a dresser, a side table, and the bed matches as well. I have a few things that I'm wanting to glue down here, specifically this hat stand. I made this hat stand in a previous video. Well, it's actually a kit that I changed the hats so that they look like the 3 hats that you see Gomez wear in the first movie. But it is the #1 most common thing to fall out of the Addams Family house and break, so I am excited to glue it down. I also have a pair of suspenders that I'm wanting to glue down somewhere there. I have a flower for Morticia on her bedside, and I also had this fan, which I don't end up gluing down. I do decide on gluing down a violin. I'm not sure if it's Morticia or Gomez that plays the violin. I think at some point they both play it, but it's a pretty romantic instrument, so I thought it would work on the bedroom suit. And then I decided to put the suspenders into the drawer. And this is another bonus of gluing things down, is I can actually make them look like they have gravity, so it looks like the suspenders are actually kind of draped over the front of the drawer, giving them weight that they don't actually have. Here is the final dresser piece, and then the only thing I end up gluing down on Morticia's side table is the flower. I think the clock is just a little bit too cheery, so I might end up painting it before it gets a permanent spot, but I wasn't ready to glue anything else down, so I'm pretty happy with those decisions. Now I'm moving on to the dining room table, and this I just kind of sat down and played with all of the plates and knives and forks and everything that I had until I was happy with the way that it looked. I know that the copper looking plates are not all even, they're not all exactly the same, but I think that gives them a little bit of charm, and that's one reason I really liked them when I first saw them. I had a few cleavers that I wanted to play with, and then I got the idea that maybe they didn't have forks and spoons on the table. All they really had were knives, possibly? Oh, and I also forgot I was working on the sideboard at the same time, you just couldn't see it. And so I was picking up all the silver things, anything that maybe looked like a fancy serving platter to go on the sideboard. So as you can see, each place got a knife, and there are only 6 places while there are 7 family members, but I don't think Lurch would probably sit at the table, so that's kind of how I'm justifying it in my mind. I ended up only gluing down the plates, the knives, and the salt and pepper shaker. The reason for this is I figured I could change out the centerpiece whenever I wanted to, or add different things to the table, because I might one day want to do a Addams Family Christmas scene, and I want to have that freedom to be able to change things out a little bit. But I think I want the plates and the knives to be there always and to be an easy setup. Same thing with the sideboard. I might be able to add food there, but for now, all of these things are glued down forever. And here is how it is all looking inside of the dining room, which reminds me I really need to age those chairs. They are sticking out. It's at this point that I pulled out Gomez's desk, and I started to try and work on that, but I realized I wasn't ready to work on Gomez's desk yet, so I just put that back. And then I grabbed Grandmama's table. This one is possibly the most fun because it is supposed to be a huge mess. And of course, you know, those are my favorite scenes to create, where it's just mess and chaos everywhere. There's not really a rhyme or reason to anything on her table except that it's kind of weird and doesn't make a ton of sense. There's a lot of tools, there's some food type stuff, there's a couple like science-y type things, but I think all in all it gives the right feeling for Grandmama. I glued things to the top of her table, I glued some dishes into her sink, which I want to age those as well, and then I also glued things onto the butcher block. I have a burned pumpkin pie that I made. I didn't mean to burn it, but worked out because now it's part of the Addams family. And here's how it all looks in Grandmama's kitchen. And I think the posters just add so much. I really don't know why I waited so long to add these in. I think it was just nerves, but I do not regret the posters at all. And the final thing I want to do before I call it a week is put this canvas print that Kim sent me into the house in that dedicated area at the end of the upper hallway. I thought it would look really cool with some kind of shroud over it. That kind of struck me as kind of Addams Family-esque. And so I have this material that is supposed to be, I don't know what it was called. It's from the dollar store. They have it in white and they have it in black, and it's basically just a mesh fabric. And so I added it all around the sides and the top of this painting, and I really like this because this was the first Addams Family movie I ever saw. It's the reason I fell in love with the Addams Family, so I love that this is the portrait that's kind of highlighted at the end of the hallway. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it, even though it was a lot of footage of just gluing things. But for me, this has been a big leap forward. I think it gives me a little bit more peace of mind because those decisions have been made. Those decisions are final. I'm not going to be moving it or changing it in the future, and I can use that brain power and that decision-making power that I have left in order to work on some of these other things that have not been completed. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't and you would like to. Also, let me know in the comments if you are a gluer or a non-gluer, or if it depends. I hope you're all having a happy, spooky October, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!